right, welcome back to this week's podcast, and today we are very excited on our topic.
Expectations.
Yes, something that a lot of people have, a lot of people don't have, a lot of people just have a lot of questions about expectations. So hopefully today we can touch on that a little bit and just give you our take on expectations. All right?
This is the story of freedom. This is the story of freedom. This is the story of freedom. We're gonna sing to freedom. This is the story of freedom.
So was there ever a time that you expected something from me that I either didn't give or didn't meet your expectation?
The one that comes to me like off the top of my head is like how we parent and things like that, like the way we show our love and affection towards our kids. So like me, I'm like they're in my face all day, every day, kissing, things like that on a lap, and I expected that to be the same way that you showed your love towards them too, but it wasn't. It was more like running around screaming around the house and just making loud noises. So it was a different way. But in the beginning, I was like caught off guard because I'm like, why is he not like this?
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we talked about a little bit is when it comes to expectations, like nobody can read your mind. So I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people have with expectations in the beginning is like they have these thoughts and they expect things from their spouse and stuff like that, but it's like they don't ever say it. So it's like, how could the other person know if you never communicate what those expectations are? And what if the person don't agree with it?
Yeah. Like,
what if it's something, that they're unable to meet? So it's funny that you said, you gave that example about parenting, because my way of doing it might not be your way of doing it. But, it's like if the person don't know and like in your mind you getting upset with the person, it's like, well, then we back at conversation one, which is communication.
Yeah. So, I mean, was there anything? I'm sure it was. I mean, in any relationship, there are some things that you expect and that just aren't being met. In any relationship, whether it's mom, dad, brother, friends, spouse, or whatever. But what was one thing that you expected from me that, didn't get met?
I think in the beginning it was more, it wasn't like anything like physically or anything like that. It was more so support. And so like in the beginning of our marriage, I dealt with a lot of like, depression and things like that I didn't know that I had.
Right.
And I expected certain responses from you, or I expected certain support from you. But the crazy thing is I didn't even communicate my depression to you at that point. So it was like I was going through something that I had no idea about, that you had no idea about, and I was expecting you to do something that I never told you about. Right. So it was unfair expectations at that point, because I didn't communicate it to you. To even tell you what I was going through, how I needed help. I didn't even know how to help myself at that point. So it was just unfair expectations, I think.
Yeah. So who in your life do you put expectations in place for?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the people that I put expectations on are people who that I do life with, if that makes sense. So like, especially like my spouse, that is 24/7, right? You gotta expect something from your partner. And then, close family members. But like I said, I just want to reiterate, like, I think you got to be really careful with having expectations with anybody.
If you don't communicate those
if it's not communicated.
Yeah, so like you can't just go up to your, like, you can't expect your mom to babysit your kids whenever you feel like you under pressure sometimes. Right. If you don't communicate, like, hey, I am feeling it right now. Like, I really need this time, and I really need for you to step in sometimes and do this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, in every relationship, you have to communicate those expectations.
Yeah. And I think that even, like, outside of an intimate relationship, like with your spouse, you still, and I just thought about this, I hadn't even considered this, but, like, I think you still have to be careful with expecting somebody to do something. Because, like, the example you use, like, it is easy to get overwhelmed with your kids and stuff like that, and in your mind you can be like, dang, why ain't nobody helping me? Like, and you start to get frustrated with people that's not helping you, and like you said, one, you didn't communicate to them, so you can't really get frustrated that they didn't help you. But what if you did communicate and they still say no?
Yeah.
You still can't be upset, because that is their right to say no, to say I'm tired, to say I want peace, I don't want to, babysit. That is their right to say that. Yeah. And if you are expecting them to say yes, then you that there's nothing you can do if they say no. Yeah. And so I think another part of the expectation thing
is go ahead.
I think you know where I'm going at.
You have to expect a yes or no and be completely fine with whatever decision that person made.
Right. And so in a marriage, I think one of the things we dealt with, and I didn't even consider that this is a part of expectations, is that expecting a certain answer. Right? So it's like, if somebody asks for something, I expect you to say yes. But when you don't say yes, I get upset. Yeah. Right? So it's like, you got to also, like you just said, be expecting any answer and okay with any answer and find peace in any answer, because that is the other part of expectation. Is like, if you're expecting your spouse to do something and you already got it made up in your mind, it's like, all I got to do is ask, and this. But what if they don't? Yeah. What if they say no? Or what if they give you an answer that you don't like? And it's like, at that point, that is where you can fall short, like as far as expectations or expecting something from your spouse. So even though communication might be there, you still got to accept whatever the answer is, or whatever the outcome is, and not expect something else. Right.
Because in the beginning, like you said, when you was going through your depression and things like that, like, you expected me to be able to support you through that journey. But for me, I had no idea how to help. Right. So I was not capable of doing it, because at that moment, at that time, because I didn't know what to do. Right. And I mean, that's how it is in, other situations as well. Yeah. Like, you might expect something from somebody, but that they can't give.
That they can't give you. Yeah, and you gotta be okay with whatever that they can give. And I think that speaks to any relationship. Yes, it's not just marriage. So who do you expect things from, or who do you think that you should expect things from?
Growing up, not to put anybody on blast, but like, growing up without a dad. And like, just so much, going on and things like that in my life. I don't expect a lot from anybody except you. And that's because when I said my vows, I meant them, and when you said them to me, that's like we made a promise to each other. Yeah. So that was something different. So I only have expectations for you, and then like my children, I expect them to obey and things like that. But like, when it comes to friendships, I don't put any expectations on it. I just love, and then like, I got let down a lot when I was younger, so I didn't.
I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
I think that's why a lot of people, they come into their marriage and they approach expectations all wrong because they got let down, by parents, by people that really meant a lot to them. And so they come into marriage with no expectations, and it's like, it goes both ways. It's like, even though you got to be careful with expectations, you still have to have some type of standard as to the way that you are going to accept to be loved and treated and all those kind of things. So it kind of goes both ways. Like, expectations can be a very weird thing, I think. And complicated for a marriage.
Definitely for a marriage. Because, like you said, when you first came into the marriage, you had no expectations. But once I said I do, I had plenty.
Right.
So it's just like trying to just navigate a two-way street, but still try to go in the same direction.
That's a great way to put it. Because it's impossible. That's the thing. You can't go the same way in two different directions. No. You just can't. So that's a good point that you made. And, even me coming into the marriage with no expectations, it's like, what do you do in the marriage when you don't know what to expect? Because I think you said it last week, when you grow up and you don't see a healthy marriage, you don't see what a husband looks like, you don't see what a wife looks like, and yet alone, you don't see what a Christian husband look like or a Christian wife, and even better, you don't see what a healthy marriage look like. So it's like you got all these stages that we never experienced, like not even just an ounce of it. Right? Like not even like the worst marriage. We just didn't witness it. So it's like coming into a marriage and not having any expectations. It could just be from not knowing what to expect. Like, I don't know what to look for. I don't know what I should be wanting or expecting. And I think that's where it comes into really reading the Word and knowing, like, what is it that God has called a wife to be? What is it that God called a husband to be? Because if we don't know what to look for, it's right there. It tells us what we should look for.
Right.
And I think that's what essentially I had to do. And so at the very least, I expected those things.
I think mine came into play when we went through counseling, and he was like, and the pastor was just like, what do you do for yourself that you need to continue in this marriage? So like everything that I did for myself, and getting my nails done. I always thought about getting my nails done, but it was getting my nails done. Like
doing these nails.
It was like every 2 weeks I go to the nail salon and get my everything done. And so he was like, "Can you take on that?"
Right.
So it was like putting those out early.
That's true.
Things like that early.
Yeah, I think that's true. And somebody else was just talking about that, about being one. Like, because some people feel like, okay, we're one, but I'm an individual, right? So it's good that you touched on that way, because it's like, even though you're one, you still have to know the things that you got to do to keep you happy and to keep you sane. And just like you said, those were like getting your nails done. For me, that might be, I say it all the time, doing music. That's what keeps me in a good space. So I think that just knowing that and keeping those things up, it works.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so since you didn't see a healthy marriage growing up, or any healthy marriages growing up, what did you expect out of a marriage? Like, what did you want?
TV marriage. TV. Yeah. Like, I expected, like, and of course, this is like before we were together. This is how I envisioned what I would look like being married. It was like, just your average TV couple, like kiss each other out the door to work and get in the car and you go to work and then you come home and, honey, I'm home. And honey's cooking dinner or something, and you kiss her on the cheek while she's at the stove, and then you go and drop your briefcase down and you sit down and watch TV. It's just like, just this programming that we've seen on TV and in movies. That's what I expected marriage to look like. I didn't really know about the emotions of it. I didn't know about the realities of it, the letdowns and all that kind of stuff. I didn't consider any of that. I just looked at it as, this is going to be my wife, and this is it. You know. What about you?
That's a really good question. I asked it, but it is a good question because I don't even know the answer to that.
You didn't know what to expect.
I didn't know what to expect. Like when you said, like, I'm just thinking like what you was just saying, like TV, and I was like, dang, I didn't even look at TV like that. Like that was how I wanted my marriage to be. But that was so good because that is what most people expect, is what they see on TV.
Yeah. Or even like those real romantic movies where boy meets girl and fall in love and they just hanging out every day. And don't get me wrong, for the first couple of weeks of our marriage and even months, it was like that. It was like not even marriage, just us coming together and dating. It was like that. But it was like, the reality is that it's two people coming together, and it's hard because it's two different personalities. You gotta like really learn somebody and not put all of your expectations on them because you just can't do it. It's just like you gotta, I feel like you gotta really just take it slow and get to know a person. So like for me, I didn't think about all of those things in the marriage. I just thought about all the good stuff. And let's be real, like sex, thinking about stuff like that. Like, I didn't think about anything further than what I saw on TV. I guess that was the closest thing to a marriage that I saw. It's TV.
Yeah. I think if I'm like really thinking hard about it, like I just always kept hearing the phrase happy wife, happy life. And I'm like, oh, well, if I'm going to, I have to cater, I have to cook. Like me, I knew that I had to cook, I had to clean. That's in my head. Then I got to take care of the kid. Because I ain't want to work. I don't work now. I never wanted to work. And so I was like, I expected my husband to be able to take care of me because I didn't want to work. So I was just like, he's going to keep me happy. Because he know that he don't want no problems. Yeah. Like that was in my head, and that's just like.
I think a lot of people live by that though. Happy wife, happy life. And I remember when we was going to premarital counseling, he switched that real fast, and he was like, happy spouse, happy house. And I think that is the big difference. It's like knowing that yes, the husband needs to keep his wife happy. But it's vice versa too.
Absolutely.
And I think it can be one-sided in every relationship. I think for a majority of it is happy wife, happy life. But sometimes it is the other way too. It's just all about the husband. Like it's like all about self. But I think that knowing the balance of the happiness and what you got to do and what your responsibilities are. And by the way, I'm going to just say this too, because, a lot of people got their feelings about gender roles and responsibilities. And here's the thing, and this is what I believe, and I'm going to ask you, I think you'll agree with me, because we talked about this before, but what's happening under your roof and what's working under your roof is under your roof. So what I expect from my wife, or what I think that my responsibilities are and her responsibilities are, that is something that we discuss together. And whatever we come up with is what works for us.
Right.
And that's not saying that that's going to work for you. So you really should have a conversation with your spouse as to, well, what do you expect from me? What do you think my responsibilities should be?
I agree.
Okay.
I see it a lot now. It's like the 50-50.
Right.
And it's like, if that works for you, that is perfectly fine.
Right.
But for me, no.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I don't know if they saying 50-50 for bills or whatever.
That's what they're saying.
But no.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I'm not giving my 50% of me, and you're not giving 50% of you at all times.
Right.
It fluctuates.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's very true. And so it's like, that's an expectation in itself. Is to, if you know, say 50-50 or whatever the case is, and if we're talking about bills and stuff like that, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about effort and energy when I say 50-50. That's an expectation, because that means that I'm putting you at 50. I'm not expecting nothing more, and I'm not expecting nothing less. I can't just put you at a number and expect that to be that. It can go either way, because you're gonna fill the gaps for me, and I'm gonna fill the gaps for you. That's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about
Me
that.
too. I mean, of course, we are on the same page, because we've talked about these types of things for years. Like, it's been 10 years, so we've talked about them from beginning to now.
Yeah. One of the things that I know I dealt with, and having like a TV marriage expectation or whatever the case is, I thought that the house would be clean all the time.
Yeah.
And I learned, and it wasn't just that, but later on in our marriage, like after having kids and things like that, I learned that there was an unreal expectation. And I think that what really made me realize that is that I would come home from work and it would be toys on the floor and stuff like that. And it was like, I think that it came from, number one, like I said, unreal expectations from TV. And in my house, like growing up, my mother was like super clean. Like everything had to be neat. Like we had one of those houses where we had a whole living room that nobody could go in.
Yeah.
They're like, don't go in my living room. Like, well, what we got it for? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, so I started putting those same things on you.
Yeah.
And I had to realize, and I think God checked me on that, was like, well, if you don't like it, you do it. And that's where it flipped for me. That's where it's like the light switch went off. It's like God flipped everything, was just like, well, if you don't like it, then you do it. And because I was working and all that kind of stuff, I didn't want to take the responsibility on to do it. So you know what I had to do? I had to find in myself to be okay with it. And it was freedom.
Yeah.
It was freedom for me. It was a moment of freedom, because I think a lot of people spend so much time scrambling around and doing all this stuff and trying to keep the house clean and meet unreal expectations, and they're in bondage because they somehow feel like everything's gonna come crashing down if the house is not the way it's supposed to look.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I used to get caught up in that whole thing too. Like, we would be home and the house would be a mess, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Brendan is be home in like an hour. You know, I'm trying to scramble, clean up all this mess, and have the kids help me, and you know, get them together. And they were little,
right?
And the house was clean sometimes. You know, when you came home.
Yeah.
But by the end of all of that, I was exhausted.
Right.
I had nothing left to give.
Right.
I was too tired to talk to you.
Right.
I don't want to know about your day, because I'm gonna tell you about my day. I've been cleaning. I've been cooking.
Exactly.
So it's like, when you talk about the freedom, you have to let stuff go.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's not that important, especially not to our marriage.
Exactly. That's the main part. It's like a lot of people are, if your marriage is like a bridge, right? It's only but so much weight you can put on a bridge.
Right.
And what a lot of people do is they stack all this stuff on top of a bridge, and then when the bridge come crumbling down, they get upset and say, well, like you said, I'm not happy and all this other stuff. But what it all comes down to is like, are you putting things that matter on your marriage, or are you putting things that don't matter? Like, you got to clean the dishes every single night before you go to bed, or I'm gonna be mad when I wake up and see a fork in the sink. Well, that fork ain't got nothing to do with our marriage, right? And so that's why it's like, it's important for y'all to sit down and talk and communicate. A lot of people ain't gonna like this, but about responsibilities, because a lot of times and this goes back to expectation. You expect a responsibility out of your partner that you never communicated.
Yeah.
I never told you that I would like the house to be clean every day.
Right.
But I expected that somehow or another, and that was just me not communicating, me not knowing enough. But even still, it's like, just because you communicate, see, communication is key, but it ain't the magic word to just make everything okay either.
Right.
Because just because I communicated that to you, that don't mean that that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Or that's what you signed up for. And I can't expect it. And a lot of people ain't going to like when I say this either, but grow up.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it all comes down to, is like, husband and wife, I'm talking to both of y'all, grow up. Because if you want it done so bad, if it bothers you so bad, then you do it. You do it. You pick it. You got every strength in your body, unless you don't, to do it.
Yeah.
If you want the bed made up every single day, you do it. You make sure that it's made up every single day. If you want every dish in the sink clean before you go to bed at night, you do it.
Yeah.
Don't put something that you have internally and that you expect internally on somebody else. You can't do that. That's just unfair at that point.
Yeah. Early on, I had the conversation with you, like, I don't want to work. I never wanted to work. I wanted to be at home with the kids and cooking and cleaning. And yeah, so I never wanted to go to work. And so when it came down to me having to go to work, I was like, oh, Lord, see now, I ain't signed up for this.
Right.
You know, but it was me who I felt like I had to do those things.
Yeah.
Because I put my expectations in place and you understood that.
Yeah.
And so when it came down to me, like, I don't want to work, I'm like, then don't. Ain't nobody tell you to go to work.
Yeah. And so that's what, it goes back to, I think that a lot of pressure that ends up on marriages is placed there by the people that's in the marriage, or what they believed, or what they think that is supposed to happen. So it's like, I think that I'm supposed to help out, so I'm gonna help out. And it's like, no, that ain't what you supposed to be doing, right? So it's like, a lot of couples, they deal with that. They deal with not knowing what their space or place is in the marriage, which can only come through communication and being consistent and sticking to it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing too, is like, you came, and this was early on, like, I probably knew this before we got married. She literally said, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. And I agreed with that.
Yeah.
And I was okay with that. That meant that I would have to work and I would have to, I had to be okay with that. But that was something that I genuinely didn't care about. Like, it was okay with me from the jump. But if she never communicated that to me, and then I come into the marriage and I expect both of us to be working, and I'm like, well, what you doing? You gonna get a job or something? Like, I can't do that because we never had the conversation about it. So it was important for you to tell me that early on, because I expected it throughout our entire marriage. It was shocking to me when you had a job. Like, what you getting a job for?
I was like, I think I like working. Then I got my paycheck. I was like, I don't like working.
I was like, who told you to work? You told me you ain't want it. You get what I'm saying? So I was like, I was more shocked on the other side of it than. So it was like, but it was because it was already something that was set in place.
Right.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation with us. I know that